Welcome back to Today Assets Report, the channel that does not chase headlines. It chases the truth hiding underneath them. If you are watching this right now, you already know something big is happening in the XRP space. But I promise you, what we are about to break down today goes so far beyond the price chart that by the time we finish, you are going to look at this entire market completely differently. We are talking about a leaked slide inside a corporate presentation from an official Ripple partner, and right there at the center of that slide is XRP. And surrounding it, connected by lines like a web, are some of the most powerful banking institutions on the face of this earth. One of those names, and I want you to really let this land, is JP Morgan. Not a Reddit rumor, not a Twitter thread from an anonymous account. A slide, inside a real corporate presentation. JP Morgan's name, connected to XRP, inside an official partner architecture diagram. And the timing of when this image started circulating online, that is where this story gets genuinely insane. Because in the exact same week that slide began spreading across the internet, the very same week, the biggest banks in America were spending millions of dollars lobbying Capitol Hill to slow down the one bill that would give XRP its full regulatory green light. Think about that for a second. On one hand, JP Morgan's name is appearing inside XRP network architecture. On the other hand, big banks are throwing money at Congress trying to kill the legislation that would make XRP official. Those two things are happening simultaneously. And if that does not make you stop and ask some very serious questions, then I do not know what will. This channel exists for one reason: to decode what is actually happening underneath the noise when everyone else is talking about daily candles and short-term price moves. So today we are going to break down that JP Morgan slide, walk you through what the Clarity Act markup before Easter actually means for your position, and connect SWIFT, Santander, PayPal, and Brazil into one single picture that most people in this space have not fully put together yet. By the end of this video, you are not going to feel confused. You are going to feel clarity. Let us start with the slide itself, because this is where the story begins and it is more important than most people realize. iPayout is not some random startup operating out of a garage. They are a Ripple integrated partner actively building cross-border payment infrastructure for institutional clients. Their internal presentations map out network architecture, who connects to whom, how the system flows, and what sits at the center of it all. And what sits at the center of their network diagram? XRP, with JP Morgan listed as a connected node. Now, Ripple is never going to come out and officially confirm this. That kind of confirmation would trigger a regulatory and media storm that nobody at Ripple wants to deal with right now. So instead, they do something far smarter. They let their partners show it. They let the community find it. They watch the conversation explode naturally. That is not an accident. That is a calculated, deliberate signal. And the community picked it apart exactly the way Ripple knew they would. But here is what almost nobody is connecting right now. And this is the part where the story stops being about one bank and becomes something on a completely different scale. The global cross-border payments market processes over $150 trillion every single year. $150 trillion. Moving through a system that was literally built in the 1970s. Wire transfers that take 3 to 5 business days. Fees that eat into every single transaction. Settlement risk that no serious institution actually wants to carry anymore. XRP is not sitting in a ring competing with Bitcoin. XRP is stepping into the arena with SWIFT, and here is the part that almost nobody else in this space is saying out loud right now. Santander, a $70 billion institution, one of the largest banks in all of Europe, partnered with Ripple back in 2020 specifically to bring speed and certainty to international payments. That partnership did not end. It grew, it built. And just this week, Santander's own subsidiary, Pago NXT, was confirmed by SWIFT's official account as part of a broad group of banking and payment institutions actively helping SWIFT build their blockchain-based ledger. Not testing it, not considering it, building it. And Pago NXT has already connected its payment engine directly to Fedwire, the U.S. Federal Reserve's own real-time settlement system. XRP, Santander, SWIFT, and Federal Reserve infrastructure all converging in the same week. Pause and really think about what that means. Because this is not 3 separate stories running in parallel. This is one story. The legacy payment system is not fighting Ripple anymore. It is merging with it. And SWIFT is not building this blockchain ledger in isolation. They are building it alongside over 40 global financial institutions, with a live minimum viable product already scheduled for the first half of 2026. When you genuinely understand what that means for the $150 trillion that flows through these financial pipes every single year, the question is no longer whether XRP matters. The question becomes how much of that 150 trillion eventually settles on XRP rails, and when does that clock start ticking? But before we get to the numbers, there is a question that is not being asked loudly enough anywhere in this space right now. If institutions are already building on XRPL behind closed doors, why would those same big banks spend millions of dollars lobbying to kill the very bill that would make all of this official? What exactly are they so desperate to protect? The answer is going to make you genuinely uncomfortable, and you deserve to hear it straight. Here's what they are protecting. A standard international wire transfer costs between $25 and $50 per transaction on average. That sounds like a small number, but that fee, multiplied across the daily wire volume that banks process on a global scale, becomes a revenue stream worth hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. Banks are not in the business of making your transfers cheaper. They are in the business of charging you for the privilege of moving your own money. On the XRP ledger, that same transfer settles in 3 to 5 seconds, and it does not cost $25. It does not cost $50. It costs fractions of a single cent. Now let us scale that up. Ripple's own network is already processing over $100 billion in transactions across 60-plus live markets. That is not projected volume. That is not a forecast. That is settled, processed, real transaction volume happening right now, with live banking integrations including Banco Genial, Bank, Nomad, and Azimo in Brazil alone. One country, multiple live banks, over $100 billion flowing. That number is not theoretical. It is already on the scoreboard. And now let us zoom out even further, because the picture gets bigger when you bring PayPal into it. PayPal just enabled stablecoin access across 70 countries. 70 countries. PayPal has 400 million active users across the globe. The moment stablecoin infrastructure is live and operating at regulated scale, the demand for a fast, cheap, reliable settlement layer sitting underneath that infrastructure is not optional anymore. It is structural. Stablecoins need rails. They need a foundation to move across. And the fastest, cheapest, most institutionally connected rail in this entire market right now is the XRP ledger. So, when you line up the global cross-border payments market, worth $150 trillion annually, against the fraction of a cent cost of settling on XRPL, you are looking at the single largest efficiency gap in the entire history of modern finance. And every bank that currently charges $25 to $50 per wire knows exactly what happens to their revenue model the moment XRP starts settling those transactions for near zero. That is not a competitive threat. That is an existential one. And that is precisely why they are on Capitol Hill right now. They are not lobbying for your protection. They are not lobbying for financial stability or consumer safety. They are lobbying to protect a revenue margin that XRP makes obsolete the second it reaches full institutional scale. And every single week this legislation gets delayed is another week those banks keep that revenue stream intact. Another week they use to quietly position inside the very market they are publicly trying to slow down for everyone else. Every week you wait outside that door, they are already moving inside it. But here is something else that is happening right now that the daily price watchers are completely missing. Ripple Custody just launched in Brazil this month with CRX, a regulated institutional-grade custody solution. This is not a consumer app. This is the kind of infrastructure that banks use when they want to hold and settle digital assets on behalf of their institutional clients at scale. You do not build institutional-grade custody unless institutions are actively requesting it, and institutions do not request it unless they are already positioning to use it. And then there is Swift's own CEO who said publicly, when the blockchain ledger announcement was made, that yes, this might seem like a contradiction for the world's largest traditional payments network to be adopting blockchain technology. He acknowledged the tension directly, and then he said they were doing it anyway. I want to share my personal take on that moment because I think it matters. When the CEO of Swift publicly acknowledges the contradiction and proceeds forward anyway, that is not just a press release. That is a position statement. That is a direction being set at the highest level of global financial infrastructure. SWIFT is not experimenting anymore. SWIFT is integrating. And the question every institution inside the SWIFT network, which spans over 200 countries and territories, is now asking is not should we use blockchain. The question is which blockchain and how soon, and the answer is already written inside the architecture. Santander's subsidiary is inside the build. Santander has been a Ripple partner since 2020. That is not a coincidence. That is a through line. Now let us talk about the legislative deadline because this is the part that requires your full attention and a real sense of urgency. Senator Kevin Cramer confirmed publicly this week that the Clarity Act needs a markup before Easter. Easter 2026 falls on April 5th. That is less than 3 weeks from now. And I want to be clear about what a markup actually is because the word sounds procedural, but the stakes are enormous. A markup is the moment a Senate committee officially votes to advance a bill to the full chamber for debate. Without a markup before Easter, the legislative calendar gets swallowed by political noise, budget fights, election year maneuvering, recess periods, competing priorities. Multiple voices inside and outside Congress have now said the same thing plainly. If this bill does not move before the end of April, it most likely does not pass in 2026. That is not speculation from an anonymous online source. That is a binary outcome with a specific name and a specific date attached to it. And the central sticking point right now is not even XRP classification. It is stablecoin yield, and whether yield can be earned on crypto assets held at exchanges rather than only inside the traditional banking system. The big banks want that yield locked inside their infrastructure. They want to maintain their capital advantage. They want you dependent on their system rather than earning returns on decentralized platforms. This is the same lobbying pressure that has stalled clarity for this industry for years, and it is being applied at the most critical possible moment. The exact moment when Ripple is already live in 60 markets, JP Morgan's name is showing up in partner architecture, and SWIFT is actively building a blockchain ledger with Santander. The regulatory green light and the institutional infrastructure are converging on the same 3-week window, and the question becomes who actually controls whether that window opens or stays shut. But here is something that most XRP holders have not fully calculated yet, and it changes the entire supply-side equation. There is a force already in motion that no lobbyist on Capitol Hill can stop. No amount of spending can reverse it. And it is compressing the market underneath the surface right now, whether the bill passes or not. XRP has a fixed maximum supply. That number does not change. It cannot change. But what is changing every single month is how much of that supply remains accessible at current prices. As institutional integrations go live, Banco Genial, Braza Bank, JPM Connected Architectures, Swift's 40-bank blockchain ledger, the demand for XRP as a settlement asset increases structurally, not because of hype, not because of social media energy, because settlement requires liquidity. When you settle transactions at institutional volume across 60-plus live markets simultaneously, you need tokens to move. And when that demand compounds across all those markets at once, the available float at today's price gets tighter. That is not a future scenario. That is a present reality that is already playing out beneath the noise. Every new live banking integration creates new structural demand pressing against a ceiling that will never move. And the institutions building into this market right now are not announcing their entries. They are positioning quietly, exactly the way JP Morgan's name quietly appeared on a partner slide before anyone expected it. XRP ETFs have pulled in over $1.37 billion in inflows since November 2025. That money is not speculating on a short-term price move. That money is locking supply at current prices while the regulatory framework gets finalized. That is institutional behavior. That is front-running the clarity event in the most deliberate way possible. And I want to speak directly to something right now because I know what some of you are carrying as you watch this. The price is not moving the way you expected. The Clarity Act has been delayed before. The January markup got postponed, and now the deadline is Easter. Every week there is a new headline, and the chart barely reacts. You are sitting in a position that feels like it should be performing, and instead you are watching and waiting and wondering if you missed something. I hear that. And I am not going to stand here and tell you that frustration is wrong or irrational. What I'm going to tell you is this. The period of maximum frustration is almost always the period directly preceding a structural breakout. That is not motivation talk. That is not hype. That is the documented historical pattern across every major asset revaluation in modern financial history. Before the internet went mainstream, the people holding positions in that infrastructure felt exactly what you are feeling right now. Before mobile payments became universal, the people closest to that build were exhausted and questioning everything. The price did not reflect the reality, until the day it did, all at once, in a move that looked obvious only in hindsight. Here is my personal conviction, and I want to say it plainly. I believe we are establishing the bottom within the next 6 months. I believe that going into 2027 and 2028, XRP sees a run unlike anything we have previously witnessed in this asset's entire history. Not because of speculation, not because of YouTube energy, because Ripple is already live in 60-plus markets, because Swift is already building with Santander, because JP Morgan's name is already on the architecture. The infrastructure is not coming. It is already here. It is already running. The one signal I am watching above everything else is the Clarity Act markup. If it hits before Easter, the regulatory and institutional tracks do not just converge, they collide simultaneously. That is not one catalyst firing. That is every catalyst firing at once. And for anyone asking what if it gets delayed again, here is the data point that answers that directly and completely. Brazil did not wait for US legislation. 60 markets did not wait. PayPal did not wait. Swift did not wait. The world is not sitting on its hands waiting for Washington to catch up. It is building, integrating, and moving forward with or without the bill. The bill is the accelerant. It is not the foundation. The foundation is already poured. So here's the final question you need to answer for yourself right now. Given everything we laid out today, JP Morgan, Swift, Santander, Brazil, $150 trillion in cross-border payments, fixed supply, institutional custody, PayPal in 70 countries, are you going to let the lobbying budget of a handful of big banks decide your financial future for you? JP Morgan appearing on a partner slide is not a coincidence. It is a position. Swift announcing a blockchain ledger with Santander is not a test. It is a direction. Brazil going live at over 100 billion in volume is not a pilot. It is proof of concept at full scale, and the big banks spending millions on Capitol Hill are not protecting you. They are protecting their window to get positioned before you do. Most people right now are looking at price charts, debating $2 versus $3, waiting for a signal. You already have one. Multiple, in fact. And that is exactly why you are still here watching Today Assets Report. Subscribe right now because the next video runs the supply side numbers for what happens the moment the Clarity Act passes and institutional demand hits simultaneously. And even the most bullish person in this space is going to be surprised by what that calculation shows.